At the end of last year and again these past few months, I've been practicing with a new camera acquisition, the Fuji GW690ii.
F11. 1 second.
Lovingly dubbed the Texas Leica, it was first introduced in 1985 by the Japanese company Fujifilm as a successor to the original Fuji GW690. The camera is a rangefinder, meaning that focus is achieved by aligning two viewpoints together as you adjust the lens. The image quality is absolutely incredible from this camera. So many colors and details are beautifully rendered on the film with subtle gradations in tone. Even the corners of the image look great in my opinion, and this is with very little additional sharpening in Lightroom, or just the default settings in some cases. This is because the Fuji GW690ii produces a 6x9cm frame, roughly. It uses medium format film like my Bronica S2, but because of the larger frame size, there's even more resolution compared to the negatives from my Bronica. This is probably the biggest draw for this camera. There's a lot of frame sizes when it comes to medium format film, but there really aren't enough options when it comes to a 6x9 aspect ratio, which is the same aspect ratio as 35mm film. Plus, the camera feels portable, and the lens is well made with a maximum aperture of f3.5. So you might be wondering, what's the catch? Why aren't there a ton of Fuji GW690s on your YouTube feed? For starters, the camera's lens is fixed. By design, you can never change the lens. And given the prices, around $750 US at the time of this video, that's a pricey proposition for a camera. Film is expensive too, and you only have 8 frames before a roll is finished. Now factor in development for the roll, or if you need to ship it to a lab, and then there's scanning, if you haven't already invested a lot of money into scanning at home. Yeah, it's getting rough. Besides these factors, there are actually 2 annoying limitations with this camera. If you're like me and you love the creative possibilities of nighttime in film, then the prospect of this camera probably sounds pretty good because it's entirely manual, it's devoid of batteries, so in theory, less likely to fail, so yeah. But behold the infamous T setting. Many film cameras have shutter speeds as fast as 1/1000th of a second and as slow as 1 second. Past 1 second, there's usually a B setting, which stands for bulb. Here, the shutter stays open as long as the shutter button is pressed. So with a shutter release cable, the cable can lock the shutter to stay open, allowing for super long exposures. The Fuji GW690ii has a T setting instead of a B, which seems similar, and there's a place to put the shutter release cable. But when you press the shutter button, it actually keeps the shutter open until you reach over onto the shutter dial on the lens and change it back to 1 second. Back to 1. That click was the shutter closing, and because lens hood is over the lens while I'm doing that, the shutter closes and there's no motion blur, or in theory there should be no motion blur because the lens cap was covering over the lens. So yeah, that's how you do long exposures with the Fuji GW690. The second limitation is that the minimum focus distance for the lens, that is, the closest the camera can physically be to your subject for sharpness, is 1 meter, or about 3 feet and 3 inches. Now that may not seem too bad, and I do think limitations can be a good creative exercise, but if I'm being honest, it does hinder my experience. Because this camera is portable, functioning as a giant 35mm film camera, I often want to focus up close, or immerse the camera in a space when I'm tired of photographing at a medium distance. This photograph was at the minimum focus distance, and to me it's interesting with the previous image, but sometimes knowing that I couldn't get up close was paralyzing, and I think it can lead to photographs that feel a little flat. All this being said, the Fuji GW690ii is still a great camera. Yes, some limitations to overcome, and the practice is a little expensive. But I have to admit there's just something about this camera that's really captivating. I don't know, getting the film back from the lab and scanning the negatives myself, there's just so much resolution and just so much richness to the colors and to the tones. I don't know. It's, hard to fully articulate all the reasons why, but I do hope the film scans in this video help a little. I'm going to wrap up the video here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll continue practicing with this camera in future videos. If you did enjoy this type of content, I'd appreciate a like, or you could subscribe for more. Thanks so much guys, more to come. Peace.